Hi, John and Mary Jackson. It's great to meet both of you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time to meet me today. I really appreciate it. I know being in the Northern Virginia, DC area, traffic around here is pretty tough. So thank you guys for braving the traffic and taking the time to drive out and meet with me today. I appreciate it. Yeah, of course. How are things going? How's the family doing? Good. That's great. I know for me, it's definitely convenient. It's nice having family around. I know my grandparents live only about 20 minutes away, so it's great to be able to consistently see them and have them be a part of our lives so much. So I'm glad it's the same way for you guys. I know it's very rewarding. So definitely a great situation for you guys. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for taking the time to come meet with me today. I'll go ahead and give you a little intro about myself, talk a little bit about the firm, what we do, and then we'll get into the planning. So obviously we reviewed all the things that you've sent over, we've discussed. So we have some recommendations based on what you've sent over. We've reviewed everything. So some recommendations and then some action plans moving forward. So based on our recommendations, what can we do in the immediate future to help benefit your financial plan? So we'll talk through all that. And normally, when we go into these meetings, we'd have a detailed discussion, talk about goals and different things like that. But you've already mentioned a few of them, which is great. So we'll talk through a couple of those. So, first of all, talking about estate and gift tax liability, if any arises, and making sure estate planning documents are in order. So, obviously, for you guys, the estate planning is definitely something to be considering. A lot of people don't. So, it's great that you're on the forefront, making sure that you're thinking about those things. Definitely very important. So that's something that we've reviewed. We have some recommendations on that side. So we'll talk about some of those. Reviewing insurance contracts and talking about long-term care policy potentially. Again, lots of great things to think about there. I know our insurance friend Jake is the one who referred you, so he'll be the one who can give a little more detail on those. We have some recommendations that we prepared based on reviewing your financial plan, some things to think about. So definitely something that we can review with Jake moving forward, which is great. Reducing personal income taxes if possible, definitely something that can be done. We'll talk through some different strategies to be able to do that on a current basis and then moving forward on an annual basis as well. And then based on your risk tolerance, developing a portfolio that meets your needs. So definitely something that we have a lot of experience with here at our firm. So we'll be able to help out with a lot of those details and things. So absolutely. And before we start, any questions that you have? I know we just talked about the goals. We'll have a lot that we talk through in our planning recommendations, but any questions, anything that I missed that is important for you guys as we go through this plan? All right. Well, hopefully I cover everything. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Give a little intro on myself too. My name's Jackson Philippart. Work here at XYZ Capital Management. Went to the University of South Carolina. Was a finance and management major. Graduated a few years ago. And after I graduated, I interned here when I was in undergrad, and now I've worked here for the past 3 years. So we are a firm that specializes in high net worth clients. So particularly, we have about 60% of people on the athlete side. So working with a lot of professional athletes on managing their money and the contracts that come in for them. Obviously, it's a very interesting section of the marketplace. And then the remaining 40% is other high net worth individuals, and a lot of them are former business owners like you. So want to congratulate you, John, on the sale of your business. I know it's something that you've worked really hard on, and absolutely a very rewarding experience to be able to pass that on and realize the profits of the hard work that you've put in over the years. So definitely something that we want to consider and take care of, and you've definitely come to the right place in terms of being able to have somebody who can help guide you through that process and make sure that we're meeting those needs. So absolutely. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Why don't we? So always like to start these out with kind of a general financial picture for you guys. And one thing we like to talk about with our clients is varying degrees of great. So you've worked really hard and sold your business, which is fantastic. And now you've put yourself in a situation where you are in a fantastic spot financially, looking at a net worth of a little under $14 million based on your current net worth statement, you are in a fantastic financial spot. So it's definitely something, you're in a great position already. So for us, it's about maximizing that position and making sure that we can do things to help you, make sure that that wealth lasts and transitions well. There's lots of different strategies that we'll get into, but wanted to start out with you are in a fantastic position. Congratulations on your hard work and building such a substantial net worth. It's tough to do. Not many people can do it. So it's great that you've put yourself in this position. And now it's about how can we move forward to maximize that goal, which is great. So a little bit about the business sale. You sold your business $4 million, and based on the terms that you provided, current structure, the current amount receivable on the installment note is a little under $2.9 million. So obviously, you've realized a lot from the sale of the business this year. You'll realize a lot more from the sale of the business over the next little over 6 years based on the installment note. So definitely a lot of cash flow coming in, which creates a lot of opportunities for us on the investment side, on the gifting side. And those are things that we'll get into moving forward, but it definitely gives us a lot of flexibility on the planning side to be able to do some interesting things, which is great. Um, Current residence, no mortgage on your primary, which is great. Small mortgage, a little over 60,000 left on your vacation home. 4.75% interest rate. Normally it's kind of a preference thing. So in this case, we're earning a lot on cash at this point based on our current market situation. So I don't see an immediate need to pay that off. You still have 3 years left, and you have plenty of cash flow to be able to meet those needs moving forward. But in terms of cleaning up things on the debt side, it's the only long-term debt you have. So if being debt free is something that's really attractive to you, you also have the cash flow availability to be able to pay that mortgage off if that's something you're interested in. I don't know if it's something that I would recommend directly at this point, but it's definitely something to think about, especially as interest rates change, cash yields change. Definitely something to think about as we move forward. But again, in a great spot financially, substantial net worth, not a lot of debt, which gives us a lot of opportunities to do some interesting things in terms of ensuring that your net worth is safely protected and being able to enhance the current planning structure that's in place, which is great. So along those lines, something else that we've talked about is a 529 plan. So being able to fund the educational needs for your grandchildren, which is a great goal. It's awesome to be able to be in that position to help be able to pay off those educational expenses. So kind of getting into what a 529 plan is. So 529, it's an educational savings plan. Basically what you can do is you can contribute, and you contribute tax free. It grows tax free, and the distributions are tax free if they are used to meet your educational expenses. So college education, tuition, room and board, books, different things like that. So as far as contribution limits go, each of you, so John and Mary, could each contribute up to the annual exclusion. So the annual exclusion is basically how much can we gift to a beneficiary without impacting our lifetime gift tax exemption. So the annual exclusion this year is $19,000. So each of you can contribute that amount, so $38,000 to each grandchild's 529 plan, which is great. Now, the interesting thing with 529 plans is you can actually front load that annual exclusion over 5 years. So you have your annual exclusion, you can multiply that by 5 and front load the 529 plan to maximize the investment capability of those plans. So each spouse could contribute up to $95,000. So that would be $190,000 total if both of you contribute for each grandchild. So $190,000 in each grandchild's 529 account, a fantastic place to start in terms of being able to save for educational needs moving forward. So definitely a great plan for James and Jill. Something I wanted to bring up with Kevin is obviously with his age, he's either in college or he's very close to college at this point. So something that might make a little bit more sense is directly paying his tuition expenses to the school. So if you directly pay Kevin's tuition expenses, It's no gift tax consequence to you. It fully covers Kevin's tuition while he's at school. So you're not limited to any of the annual exclusion numbers that would be involved. Uh, and again, with the 529, you want to be able to invest and grow that amount over time. But if he's already in college, there's not a lot of capability to be able to do that. So instead of limiting yourself as far as the annual exclusion goes, you can go year by year, directly pay his tuition expenses. You don't have to worry about the annual exclusion, which is great. You have the cash flow availability to do so, which again is not anything that would limit you on that side. And if you want to fully pay, if you want to do tuition, or if you want to do room and board, books, different things like that, you can either use the annual exclusion to gift that amount directly to Kevin so that he can pay that, or you could gift it to your son, Robert, who'd be able to help with that as well. So I think the recommendation here would be front loading 529 plans, great strategy for James and Jill. And then for Kevin, maybe think about some direct expenses. So paying that tuition directly to the school. If making sure that your entire grandchildren's college education is paid for, I think that's definitely the route to go towards. So, any questions related to any of that? I know it's a lot of detail on the 529s, and we'll be able to help with that funding process, opening accounts, and we'll be involved in the investment selection as well. Because with the time horizon we have, we want to make sure that we're meeting a growth need, but also making sure that as we get closer to college, we're making sure we save that amount and we're not exposing ourselves to any additional market volatility if we can avoid it. All good? All right, so we'll keep going. Kind of getting into the risk management side of things. So obviously Jake is the one who referred you, insurance agent. He does great work. And so you already are in a great spot on the risk management side. So home policies in place that cover your needs, which is great. Auto insurance policy, which is strong. We have life insurance policies for both of you, which is great. And we'll get into some potential tweaks that could help maximize those in a little bit. But overall, strong insurance picture based on your cash flow. Again, tons of cash flow, a lot of availability to meet these needs. And we want to make sure that you're protected moving forward. So some things that we reviewed that we think could make a lot of sense. I know you mentioned potential flood damage on the vacation home, considering its location near the Connecticut River. So something that we've done a lot with our clients is flood policies. So currently, home policies generally don't cover any excess flood damage that comes in from the outside. So we'll implement a flood policy for clients that helps cover any damage that's directly associated with floods. So based on the location, it sounds like that's something that could be really effective for you guys. So that's something that we'll talk to Jake about. We'll see if we can find a policy that makes sense based on what we think that need could be. So we'll get into some more detail on that. Something else that we talked about too is the Jenny stamp. So we want to make sure that that's a valuable article. Obviously, you look at your balance sheet; it's definitely worth a lot, which is fantastic. And that's something that we want to protect. So a stamp obviously is very exposed to theft risk, to damage risk, different things like that. So a valuable articles policy to make sure that that Jenny stamp is properly insured is definitely something that we would consider. I think that's something that could be high priority on the needs list. And then some other policies, watercraft policy for the boat. So similar to the auto policy that you have on your car, you can have a watercraft policy for your boat to make sure that those any accidents or damage that's taken to the boat is taken care of. So that's definitely something that we would think about. And then also at your net worth, we typically recommend umbrella coverage. So we live in a litigious society, so people like to sue. It happens to everybody. So having that excess liability coverage to help meet any needs that could be associated with that is definitely something that we think about. Usually for clients like you, typically in the $1 million range is appropriate in terms of making sure that you're covered on the liability side on top of the policies that you already have in place. So all those policies are things that we'd recommend. Best way to go about this is probably having a follow-up meeting with Jake to make sure that we're meeting all these insurance needs in a way that makes sense for you. On the cash flow side, we want to make sure that we have enough to meet those needs. And also, we want to make sure that we're not over-insuring. So we want to make sure that you're properly insured to meet those needs. And that's something that we'll talk about as well. Something that is included on the financial plan. Based on our relationship with Jake, we do have a referral program where we are compensated based on our relationship with him. So we have an extra handout that's included with the financial report that gives you all the details on that. My mindset on that is we're here, we have the fiduciary duty. So our job is to do what's best for you on the financial side. So I wouldn't be making these recommendations if I didn't think that it would make sense to insure a lot of these items, particularly the Jenny stamp. I think something that's that valuable is worth insuring. It's worth protecting and making sure that that's safe and safeguarded. So all those things are recommendations that I would recommend to anybody. I'd recommend if it was a different insurance agent. But if you have any questions, absolutely reach out to me, talk to Jake about it. And again, all those disclosures are included on the other statement. So happy to answer any questions you guys have on that front. And anything that arises immediately. All right, good. Means I'm doing my job. That's all right. So talked a little bit about the life insurance policies, potentially gifting those to grandchildren. We'll get into a little bit more detail on that side later. That is something that's an option. You'll be open to what's called generation skipping tax if you do that. So we did a little calculation that's included in the report that details what that might look like based on annual exclusion, different things like that. I think we would have a different idea in mind in terms of how we gift those policies. And again, we'll get into that a little bit later. And then lastly, long-term care policy. I think it's something that absolutely makes sense for both of you based on the age, the potential need, and again, the cash flow situation. You have the cash flow to be able to do that, so why not be able to protect yourself moving forward? The question here would be, do you have enough assets to make sure that you don't even need to reach out and utilize those long-term care policies? So the benefit only goes for 3 years. I think a 3-year policy would, you could utilize the money that you have from your current assets to be able to meet those needs. I think if you were looking at a long-term care policy, you're probably looking at something that could give you a long-term gain. So, for example, you talk about Alzheimer's, dementia, different things like that. Those can be really long processes, and it's stuff that's scary to think about. Unfortunately, it's something that I've dealt with my grandparents and great grandparents before, and it can be a really long process. So if you're looking at long-term care policies, I would recommend you have the asset base to be able to meet current needs. I don't think that's as big of a deal, especially based on the policies that we reviewed. But in terms of a longer term, first few years are covered, but longer benefits, I think that's something that we would definitely look at. So that'll be something that we review, and we can get back to you to see what kinds of policies might make sense on that front. So any questions on that side? All right, we'll keep it moving. So in terms of investment planning, so you came to us in terms of you want to maximize a diversified portfolio, want to make sure that you're getting the return that's involved for the risk that you're taking. And that's something that's very important to us. John, you worked hard on your business, and that's a lot of concentrated risk, right? You're putting a lot of your time and net worth into this business, and now that you've sold it, that risk is kind of diversified at this point. Still some credit risk associated with the note and things like that, but generally you've done a great job to build the business, and now you're realizing the rewards. So you've taken the risk at this point. And obviously you're open to a little bit of risk, which is great. We want to make sure that we're growing your assets over time, but we don't want to take any unnecessary risk at this point. A lot of market volatility, especially recently. And so that's something that we want to account for as we build out your portfolio. So we took a look. One thing that we wanted to point out, the taxable portfolio. So between the stocks that you have available and the mutual funds that you currently have, that portfolio has kind of underperformed the market. And so there's some analysis that we've done that's included in the written report that details the specifics of what that looks like. But our goal is to be meeting or exceeding market expectations. So, and I think there's a couple of low-hanging fruit that we can use to make sure that we are getting closer to meeting that target. One thing we can look at is tax harvesting. So being able to tax harvest, so this stock A that's included in your stock portfolio, we could harvest up to $218,000 in losses, which would be fantastic. We can harvest those losses. We can use them to offset some of the rearrangements that we do to your portfolio, and you can carry forward those losses moving forward. So if you're realizing investment income in future years, you can utilize this loss to help offset some of those gains. So definitely something that we'd consider doing on that side. Secondly, in your mutual fund portfolio, definitely have a heavy weight towards your international fund. It makes up for almost 40% of your portfolio, which is pretty significant, especially considering our current, obviously internationals have done really well recently, but generally in terms of a legacy asset, these assets have kind of underperformed over the longer term time horizon, and it exposes you to a lot of risk on the international side, right? And we've talked about diversifying, limiting your risk. So I think a part of the tax harvesting on one side would be to reallocate the mutual fund portfolio on the other side, trim out some of that international. It's performed well. You'll have some gains on that, but that gets offset by some of the losses that we've realized from stock A. And then we can rearrange that towards more fixed income and growth oriented positions. I think that's something that would make a lot of sense. Build out a more balanced portfolio, making sure that we're meeting your allocation needs in terms of diversification and also matching your risk with your reward. So another thing too would be diversifying your retirement accounts. So currently in each of your retirement accounts, they only have one fund, which is, both these funds have performed well up to this point, which is great. Obviously fantastic to be able to build those retirement savings, but we want to be able to make sure that your retirement accounts are diversified and not as exposed to market risk as they currently are. And something else too is it's easier to do that diversification in a retirement portfolio versus a taxable portfolio because there's no tax consequences to doing so. So you can sell the assets that are included in your retirement account and there's no tax consequences to you. The only tax consequences are when you withdraw the money from your account. So it makes it a little bit easier to diversify on that side. Something else that we'll talk about a little bit later is potentially rolling those assets into IRAs. So that's definitely something that we'll think about, and we'll have a little bit more detail on that. But any questions overall on any of that? I know it's a lot of information on the investment side, and something else we'll recommend too is we'll go into further detail in terms of building out a well-allocated rebalance across your taxable portfolio and your retirement portfolio, making sure that we're diversifying while also meeting those risk-reward concepts. And we'll have a follow-up meeting to talk about what that looks like, get into specific details in terms of what funds we'd be investing in and how we'd be maximizing those returns. All right, that's great. So we'll keep it going. So kind of getting into the retirement planning side, and we talked about ways to grow retirement accounts tax-free. So your retirement accounts, fortunately, are already growing tax-free. So for the 401k and 403b, you've made your contributions pre-tax, which is great. The accounts grow pre-tax, so there's no consequences, no taxes on the growth, which is fantastic. But there are tax consequences when you withdraw from the account. So when you draw from your 401k or 403b, you pay ordinary income taxes on the amount that's taken from those accounts. So something that we could do to make sure those accounts continue to grow tax-free moving forward is creating a Roth IRA. So basically what that is the Roth IRA, you contribute post-tax dollars to that account, and that account will continue to grow. And when you take distributions from that account, they're tax-free. So what we would do, we'd roll over your retirement accounts into IRAs currently, and then we would take the IRA balance and convert some of that amount to Roth. Basically what that means is you pay taxes up front and you pay the tax on the amount that you withdraw. It goes into the Roth IRA, so that way it continues to grow tax-free, and any distributions from that account are tax-free. So from your retirement accounts, you're paying ordinary income. If you withdraw from your taxable accounts, you're paying capital gains. So this could be a good way for long-term savings to be able to maximize your taxable capabilities. And based on the current income that you have from your installment note, it may not make a lot of sense to do that in the immediate future, But for a Roth IRA to be completely non-taxable, it has to be open for 5 years anyways. So it probably makes sense to open those Roth accounts now to make sure that we're meeting that 5 year requirement. And then as the installment note income kind of dies down, we'll have opportunities to be able to maximize those Roth conversions. So you're not paying as much tax on the income, and then you can also bring those along as well. One other note that I like to make with the Roth, it's a great wealth transfer strategy. So when you transfer that Roth to your children, the tax dollars were already paid on that amount, so there's no need to pay taxes on the amount that's transferred. So definitely something to think about on the wealth transfer side as well moving forward. And then as far as a traditional IRA this year, so John, because you still had earned income from the business at the beginning of the year, you do have capability to be able to contribute to an IRA. So basically that's a $7,000 limit this year plus a $1,000 catch up because you're over 50 years old. So that's definitely something that we would look at. I think it's something that makes a lot of sense. It counts as a deductible item on your tax return. So that's obviously something that we like to see as well. And it's part of opening those IRA accounts. So you contribute to the account and then you can roll your 401k amount into the IRA in order to fully maximize that account. So, and then also in terms of qualified charitable distributions. So QCDs, great concept. Unfortunately, you can't do them out of a 401k or 403b at this point. But what you could do is you could roll that balance into the IRA, and then you can take up to $108,000 of qualified charitable distributions if you're over the age of 70. So for you, John, if you were to roll over your 401k into an IRA, you'd be able to make qualified charitable distributions of $108,000 this year based on your age amount. So that's definitely something that's great option in terms of reducing income taxes and another big bonus of being able to open an IRA. So any questions on any of that stuff? Awesome. I know there's a lot of concepts, so I'm always available if you have any questions. You'll have the written report as well, so you'll be able to reference that. Goes into a little bit more detail in terms of calculations and things like that, but just want to make sure that you have all the information in front of you to be able to maximize that. So in terms of income tax planning, while the installment note is being paid out, it will be difficult to be able to really reduce your income taxes just based on the income that's coming in. Uh, there's a lot involved in that. And so generally, you'll probably be in a higher tax bracket over these next 6 years, regardless. There are some strategies to be able to do that. We went through a couple calculations in terms of how basis is returned on the installment note, potentially selling machinery that's associated with the business. We calculated taxes on the Jenny stamp. Something we could do there too is potentially donating the Jenny stamp in a tax efficient way that makes sense. And that would give you a great taxable deduction that you could use to help offset some of this income on a current basis and then also moving forward as well. So that's definitely something you could think about if you're open to charitable distributions and also limiting your income. That's an option that's available to you. And then also increasing itemized deductions. So we talked about the IRA, talked about the QCD, charitable distributions in general. There's options to increase those. And just in general, there's other things that you can do to maximize itemized deductions that might be able to help lower your income tax. It probably won't be a significant amount, and it's tough because the current standard deduction on your tax return is $30,000 if you're married filing jointly, which you are. So it's tough to gather itemized deductions that would go over that amount. Qualified charitable distributions would definitely help with that. There's some other things that you can do to help maximize that as well. But in terms of income taxes, there's a lot of strategies we can do moving forward that will help reduce those taxes. Like we talked about the Roth IRA already. So definitely a lot of things that we can do on that front. But in terms of immediately with the qualified or with the installment note currently coming in, it makes things difficult on the tax side in terms of higher brackets in the short term. Any questions on any of that stuff? All right. So now we'll move into estate planning. So this was obviously an area that you all specified as a really important goal. And based on what we've reviewed on the estate side, definitely a lot of recommendations that we would have in terms of maximizing the capabilities of your estate plan. So currently, you both have wills, which is great, but there are definitely some other estate planning documents that we can implement, including financial power of attorneys on the medical and financial side, and healthcare proxies. That'll help manage your assets if something were to happen to one of you, if you were to become incapacitated or die. It gives your spouse or a designated beneficiary, designated I want to say trustee, but it gives the power to somebody in your life, whether it's your spouse or another person, to have control over your financial and medical affairs if something were to happen to you. So that's definitely documents that we'd like to get involved. It will likely be for John, you would have Mary. For Mary, you would have John, because you're both very intricate in your lives and things like that. So that's definitely something that we'll look into. And then something else that we'd look at is titling. So currently there are a lot of assets based on your balance sheet that are titled solely in John's name. So the autos, the boat, vacation home, your current residence is titled jointly, so your vacation home could be titled jointly as well. And if you retitle these to joint tenants with rights of survivorship, that basically gives both of you an equal share in the property, so that if one of you passes away, the property directly passes to the other spouse without going through probate. So this is a great way to decrease probate costs. It'll lower the expenses that would be incurred through the probate process. And probate is basically if your assets don't pass directly to a beneficiary, they go through what's called probate. So the state goes through a process to help determine who the beneficiaries of that property are. So generally, it's going to be the same beneficiaries that you would want the property to be passed down to, but because it goes through a state process and there's a legal process involved in that, there's expenses that are associated with that. So lowering any probate costs that are involved is definitely something that we are interested in. So retitling to joint tenants with rights of survivorship is a great way to do that. Another great way to do that is establishing a revocable trust for John. So there's a lot of high value assets like the mutual fund portfolio, the remaining installment receivable from the sale of the business, the Jenny stamp, some valuable items that are held exclusively in John's name. So there's two things we could do. We could title those as joint tenants with rights of survivorship if you're interested in having both spouses eligible for those assets, so that if John passes, it goes to Mary and vice versa. Something else that we can do is we can establish a revocable trust. So basically what that means is the assets are titled in the revocable trust name. John still has access to designate who the beneficiaries are of those. A lot of times John will be the trustee, so he has access to change those beneficiaries based on how things go. So it could be transferred to Mary, it could be transferred to children, grandchildren. There's different ways to maximize that as well. So a revocable trust is a great way to make sure that your assets avoid probate. So again, lowering probate costs, and that the assets go to the proper beneficiaries that you would want at your death. So that's a strong one. And then one last thing that we'd recommend is a revocable life insurance trust, or ILITs. So what we would do is we would transfer your current life insurance policies to the ILIT, because based on the way that they're currently held, the life insurance policies will be included in your estate. But if you were to transfer to an ILIT with the beneficiaries, you mentioned your grandchildren previously in the example, if you wanted to transfer directly to your grandchildren, you can make your grandchildren the beneficiaries of the ILIT. So what that does is it takes the value of the life insurance out of your estate, so you don't have to worry about that being included in your estate, and the proceeds go directly to the beneficiaries. So that's definitely something that is attractive in terms of it removes the assets from your estate. There is a 3-year look back period. So if that's something that we're interested in, that's something that we'd want to get on top of right away in terms of making sure that we have the proper policies in place and we're taking care of those needs. But transferring those ILITs or those policies to an ILIT removes the amount from your estate and helps direct the benefit amount to the beneficiaries that are desired. There is still GST implications if it goes directly to the grandchildren. So something we could look at is gifting to the parents, and then the grandchildren would have access to that based on the parent relationship and the beneficiary structure after that. So there's some details that we'll get into in terms of the structure on the beneficiary side, but definitely something we wanted to bring up. And we'll have a meeting with an estate attorney to help detail these documents. So making sure that we get power of attorneys and healthcare proxies in place, creating the revocable trust, creating the ILET, making sure those are done in a way that the beneficiaries are who you desire, and it's in a way that it eliminates probate costs and potential estate tax costs on the life insurance benefit as it's included in your estate at this point. So, any questions on any of that? All right. Well, that covers everything at this point. So, kind of wanted to give you guys some homework, some action items based on what we've discussed. So, moving forward, we have an action plan. We can make sure that we're meeting your needs and maximizing this financial plan moving forward. So, the first thing is the meeting with that estate attorney. We'll hope to set that up. I have some strong connections that I can reach out to help set up that process. It'll be a meeting just to detail who we'd want these beneficiaries to be. There might be updating wills involved, but for the most part, it'll be establishing those power of attorney and healthcare proxies, and then establishing the trusts, making sure we're matching the beneficiaries, and then we're retitling the assets to make sure that they're held in the revocable trust name instead of the individual's name. So that's something that we'll look at. Insurance policies, we talked about meeting with Jake to make sure that the policies that we're recommending make sense. We're making sure that we're not overinsured, but we're making sure that the important items that we do have are properly insured as well. So we'll have a meeting to talk through that as well, and we'll set that up in the near future. That's definitely something to think about. Opening up IRAs. So rolling over the 401k and 403b balances into IRAs. John, you could contribute to the IRA. Something that we haven't talked about yet is the IRA also opens up a lot of options in terms of investing. So typically with the 401k or 403b, it's difficult. There's limited options in terms of what you can invest in. But with the IRA, you have a much wider variety of assets and options to be able to invest in moving forward. Now, one thing I did want to point out is if we transition these assets to the IRA, these would become assets under our management. So they would be dictated under our current fee structure based on AUM. So that's definitely something to think about too. Want you to be aware of that. Now, for me, I would say based on the increased diversification options that we have based on the IRA, the ability to do qualified distributions, take advantage of things on the tax side, and the ability to be able to roll into Roth IRAs moving forward. I think there's increased performance and increased flexibility that's associated with the IRA that would give a lot of benefits. But again, it's something that we'll talk about and have a discussion about. It's not like we have to do it immediately. We have some time to be able to roll over, make sure that we can present a plan on the investment side that would make sense for you based on our IRA options. So this isn't something that's immediate. Don't want you to feel pressured into doing something like that, but just want to make sure that you have all the facts in front of you as we continue to present that plan moving forward. So, and there's some information on AUM fees and structure that'll be included with your written handout as well. And then take actions to lower the income tax bill. So we talked about QCDs. We talked about taking more potential deductible items that could be included to get you over the standard deduction that would help lower your tax bill on that front. And you can also limit withdrawing from your investment and retirement accounts. So we talked about investment accounts, you're paying capital gains taxes, retirement accounts, you're paying ordinary income taxes, but you're already receiving a lot of income annually based on the installment note that you're getting. So that's definitely something to think about too. Can we use this installment note income in a way that maximizes our cash need? We don't need to pull any income from the taxable account. We don't need to pull any income from the retirement account. And we can continue to let those assets grow so that way we can maximize our taxable abilities moving forward, especially after the installment note finishes paying out in a little over 6 years or so. And lastly, you talk about rebalancing and diversifying your portfolio. So again, we'll go back and present some detailed investment structure, and then we'll present that to you both on the IRA side and then on the taxable side as well, making sure that we're tax loss harvesting to maximize diversification in the portfolio. We want to make sure we build out something that's well balanced for you so that we're maximizing the returns that come with the risk associated from your investments. And then on the retirement side, we talked about it's a little bit easier to maximize that diversification. So we'll probably have some more detailed options, especially on the IRA side, that we'll discuss with you. So that pretty much covers it. Any last questions that you have in terms of any of the items that we discussed today, anything included in the written report? Awesome. All right. Well, it was great meeting both of you. Thank you so much again for taking the time to meet with me. I'll send out a reminder email after this with some of the action items that are included. I'll set up the meeting with the estate planning attorney. I'll work on an introduction for you guys so that we can get that process started as soon as possible. We'll talk with Jake to talk about setting up a time to talk about insurance. And then on our side, we'll work on putting together a detailed rebalance that we can discuss. Hopefully we can meet again in about 2 weeks. Does that sound like something you guys would be interested in? Awesome. That's great. We don't have to meet in person this time. We can do a little Zoom meeting just to walk through some of the details on that side, but that's definitely something that we'd be interested in, and we'll have some more details in terms of how we'd be able to restructure your portfolios to help maximize diversification and return benefits as well. So again, thank you guys so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time and look forward to working with you guys moving forward. Awesome. Thank you.